Have you ever been in an argument where you just know you're right, but the other person is just as certain that they are? It feels like you're worlds apart. Well, what if there was a completely different way to think about truth itself? Today, we're diving into an ancient philosophy that has a really powerful solution for our very modern problem of polarization. Just think about any hot-button issue you see online. Take AI art, for example. You've got one camp, totally passionate, saying, "This is a revolutionary new frontier for human creativity." And right opposite them, you have another camp, equally convinced, saying, "Nope, this is just high-tech theft, plain and simple." Both sides are 100% sure they have a monopoly on the truth. And you have to wonder, right? How can smart, reasonable people look at the very same thing and walk away with conclusions that are polar opposites? How can they both be so unshakably sure that they're the ones who are right? What if the issue isn't really with their logic, but with the very idea that truth has to be this one, single, absolute thing? There's an ancient Indian philosophy, Jainism, that tackled this exact problem thousands of years ago. It suggests that maybe reality isn't a single point, but more like a complex, multifaceted jewel with countless different sides. And that leads us right into the first huge idea from Jain philosophy. It's a concept that really asks us to hit the reset button on how we think about what reality even is. This idea is called anekantavada. It literally translates to the doctrine of not one-sidedness. This is the philosophical bedrock. At its core, it says that reality is unbelievably complex. It has infinite qualities, infinite aspects, and can be seen from infinite perspectives. And here's the kicker, all of those perspectives can be partially true, all at the same time. It's a shift away from a rigid either-or way of thinking to a much more open both-and perspective. So why is reality so complicated from this point of view? Well, Jainism says the universe is made of two fundamental, eternal kinds of stuff. On the one hand, you have jiva. That's all the conscious souls, the infinite selves like you and me. And on the other hand, you have ajiva, all the non-conscious stuff that makes up the world. Matter, space, time, you name it. And because every single soul and every single bit of matter has infinite characteristics and is constantly in flux, the universe is just this place of staggering, almost endless complexity. Okay, so that brings up a pretty big question, doesn't it? If reality is this massive, complex, ever-changing thing, how can we possibly talk about it with any accuracy? How do we make any statement at all without immediately tripping over ourselves and creating a contradiction? This is where Jainism gets really clever and introduces a brilliant logical tool. And that tool is called Syadvada. If Anekantavada is the big idea, you can think of Syadvada as the user manual, how you actually apply it. It's a system of logic that says, hey, every single statement we make is only a partial truth. It's only valid from one specific angle. So to be accurate, we should really preface everything we say with the word syat, which means in some ways or from a certain perspective. Now, Syadvada even gives us a formal structure for doing this, which is known as the septabhangi, or the seven-fold predication. We're not going to go through all seven, don't worry, but the first three are really the foundation, and they show us how you can affirm something, then deny it, and then do both in succession, all without any logical contradiction. It's pretty cool. I know this might sound a bit abstract, so let's make it super concrete. Let's take a simple clay pot. The question is this object a pot? Seems like a simple yes or no, but Jain logic pushes us to be way more precise. And here's how Syadvada breaks it down. From the perspective of its own material, clay, and its own shape, yes, in some ways it is a pot. But from the perspective of a different material, say water, well, it's definitely not water. Or from the perspective of a different shape, like a plate, it is not a plate. So by simply clarifying the context, you can truthfully say the object both is and is not a pot. See how that works? No contradiction at all. Okay, so if every truth we state depends on a specific perspective, what exactly are these perspectives? How many are there? Well, Jainism actually has a system for categorizing the different viewpoints we can take. And this is where our third big idea, Nyayavada, comes into play. This is the doctrine of standpoints. A Nyaya is basically a particular lens you're looking through when you make a statement about something. And what's amazing is that Jain philosophy catalogs these different standpoints, fully recognizing that each lens reveals a real, genuine piece of the truth, but none of them, by themselves, can show you the whole thing. Honestly, the best way to get your head around this is to think about a photographer, right? She's about to take a picture.
Is she going to use a wide-angle lens to capture the whole scene, a standard lens for a balanced view, or a macro lens to get super up close on a tiny detail? Each lens is going to give her a radically different photo, but every single one of those photos will be a true image of the subject. They're not wrong, they're just partial.
So let's look at 3 of these lenses, or Nayas, using a person as our subject. The general Naya is our wide-angle lens. It pulls back and sees the big picture, classifying the person as part of a huge group. This is a living being. Then you have the distributive Naya. That's our standard lens. It makes a useful, practical distinction. This is a human. And finally, the actual Naya is the macro lens, zooming all the way in on this exact moment. This human is currently learning. See? All 3 statements are totally true, but they're coming from different lenses. And this brings us to the most important part. According to the ancient Jain text, the Samati Tarka, any single viewpoint, any single Naya, when it gets arrogant and claims to be the only truth, is, by definition, wrong. It's only correct when it sees itself as just one piece of a much larger puzzle, when it's willing to work together with all the other perspectives to build a more complete picture. So, this is a fascinating logical system, right? But what's the point? Why does any of this ancient philosophy really matter to us right here, right now? What's the real-world, practical payoff?
Well, we have to remember that for Jainism, this is way more than just a thought experiment. The whole point of the philosophy is to achieve moksha, the liberation of the soul from karmic entanglement. And you get there through what they call the 3 jewels: right faith, right knowledge, which is what we've been talking about, and, crucially, right conduct. And the absolute, number 1 most important rule of right conduct is ahimsa, or nonviolence. And this is where it all clicks into place. Because for Jains, nonviolence isn't just about what you do with your body. It extends to what you say with your words, and most deeply, what you do with your thoughts. This is maybe the most profound takeaway from this entire system. Anekantavada, that core idea that reality is many-sided, is actually a form of intellectual nonviolence. Think about it. When you truly, deeply accept that your own view is incomplete and that the person you disagree with might actually be seeing a different, valid piece of the truth, it becomes almost impossible to be intellectually aggressive or dogmatic. It forces you to be humble.
So, let's bring it all the way home. Let's go back to that heated black and white debate we started with about AI art. How can we look at it now, with these new tools in our pocket?
Well, instead of a shouting match, we can have a much richer, much deeper conversation. We can say, Syat, in some ways, from the perspective of human intention and aesthetic results, yeah, it is art. And we can also say, Syat, in some ways, from the perspective of its automated process and the lack of a conscious creator, it is not art. All of a sudden, the goal is no longer about winning the argument. The goal is to understand the complexity of the thing itself.
And that leaves us with this beautiful final thought from the Jain philosopher Siddhasena Divakara. This way of thinking doesn't mean truth doesn't exist or that anything goes. Not at all. It means that truth isn't something to be conquered or simplified. It's something to be explored from every possible angle, revealing a richer, deeper, and more complete picture every time we're willing to consider another point of view.